Welcome to the third session of Design United's conference, Small Measures, Great Impact. The speakers for this session are German architect Jan Glasmeier, who works in the Thai-Burma border, emerging multidisciplinary designer from Nepal Dhiraj Manandhar of studio Manankaala, and designer Ayaka Yamashita, co-founder and director of EDAYA. This session is being compared by Kavindu De Saram and moderated by architects Ayush Gangwal and Vrinda Kanvinde.
Vrinda Kanvinde is an architect from the University School of Architecture, Planning, Delhi. Her interest in history and theory of architecture, particularly pertaining to modernism in post-colonial countries, has led her to pursue an MDes at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. She hopes to go into critical architectural writing. An avid reader with a deep appreciation for the performing arts, she pursues her culinary interest in her free time. Architect Ayush is an associate architect at RMA Architects Mumbai and is currently working on various residential and institutional projects. He previously worked locally in Mumbai and Aurangabad, as well as internationally with firms in Colombo and Tokyo. He has a keen interest in architectural research and was a part of the core research team for the State of Housing exhibition organized by the UDRI and the Architecture Foundation. I now hand over the mic to Ayush and Vrinda. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much to all three of our panelists for your wonderful and really inspiring presentations. Ayaka, I think your deep appreciation for the Kalinga community, as well as trying to broaden craft skills in cross-cultural, cross-country interaction is really incredible. Dhiraj, I think your deeply rootedness in the traditions and community of Bhaktapur at the same time as espousing your very minimalist and modernist aesthetic is admirable. And Jan, I think really sensitively done work. You've used a very minimalist and modernist aesthetic, but at the same time absolutely respecting and appreciating the craft skills of the community. So really wonderful work to all of you. I think I'd just like to start off the panel by asking each of you, what are your biggest learnings from the communities with which you work? Jan, in your case, the migrant communities from Myanmar, and Ayaka, the Kalinga community in your case, and Dhiraj, the communities of Dattatreya where you were also born.
Should I start?
Sure, Jan.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually, this is something that I'm looking back to all the time anyways. It's, you studying architecture in Germany. I studied for 7 years, and it's a very long time. It's, and then you obviously learn a lot about construction. You learn a lot about design approach, and then you arrive in the, in a local community, very diverse local community. And it's mind-blowing suddenly what you learn and what you realize that you have no idea about. Yeah, the approach to materials, the approach to detailing, the approach to in craftsmanship, the use of craftsmanship. So I probably must admit that I have learned more from this in these 8 years that I've learned during my 7 years in university, obviously, because you're on the ground, you really. You've been sometimes you sometimes see or been shown detailed solution that you think, why have I not have come up with this myself? It's sometimes so easy and simple and intuitive in a way. Yeah, and obviously then there's this cultural thing. My Thai is obviously not as good because I've worked mainly with the Burmese, with the Myanmar communities. That I picked up a little bit of Burmese in the last couple of years, even more. And this is also something that I want to do a little bit more. I try to study Burmese now in London at the School of Oriental and Asian Studies to get a bit more proficient in the language. And yeah, it was just an amazing time.
Ayaka?
Sure. My biggest learning from community is like, I was always very surprised that how people in the communities is a very patient. And then because when we design the things, we back in for so many times. I reject so many designs. It's very hard to develop the product designs with the communities. And then like, because the design standards are different. And then also that but I take all that processes are very important because that's the way of learning each other, right? And then, I was really, yeah, like fascinated by like how like their way of like, it's always like there's a differences between like even like what we think is beautiful is very different. Like then we have to start from that definition. So what I think is beautiful, what they think is beautiful, or it even like doesn't has to be beautiful. Like when you make a products, and then so it's very interesting to discuss through the process and then understanding each other. But like it's so what I would say is like. I'm very thankful to the community and the people who I work with, like be patient with me and them understand me and then I understand them and then try to like to take time to really create things together. And then so I think culture is something that is very hard to do it in very short term, like your scope should be very long term. And then so I'm very thankful that people are, who I work with is really thinking the nature of the culture as like that. And then so that we cannot just decide right away what to do. Like it's not like cost efficient or like it's not time efficient things, but together, like taking time together, thinking together, like, and then I'm just so appreciate like in the people, I like that. So yeah, that's my kind of biggest learning. And then also, yeah. Sure.
Thank you, Dhiraj.
Yeah. So the community is very good at skills and crafts over here in Bhaktapur. And I think it's more about co-creating with them for me, like how I can bring my design discipline and how I can use their skills. And objectively talking about it's very simple that it's about making a product usable or making a kind of product. But for me, it's the subjectivity would be like connecting with the people, like the people who I actually see these woodworkers who I never talked to, but I'll get to go and talk to them and connect to them. So I think, and maybe they will learn something from me, and maybe I'll learn a lot more. And I think that's really.
My next question is again for all of you. As students, we have this very romantic imagination of the past, of the tradition, of cultures, of techniques. And with whatever limited understanding or misunderstanding of we have of the past, we try and end up corrupting that art form. Question for all of you: why do you all think it's important for us to understand and preserve these local techniques and local crafts?
So I think for us, it was quite interesting because when I arrived, or in this little border town where we were staying, I always say little, it's a border town. It's, we talk about 90,000 people. And then it's the migrant community that is, not counted. So the technique of working with adobe bricks, for example, wasn't really known anymore. So there was an organic farm in the north of Thailand in Chiang Mai called Pan Pan Farm, run by John Jandai. He literally brought in the technique of adobe mud brick making to Thailand again. So he went to the US and learned it there and then brought it back to Thailand. And he is sort of a center. And from him, a lot of people in Thailand actually started to, again, learn this old tradition. And then we reintroduced it into the communities in Thailand. And it's known in Thailand as Bandin. And so that means house of soil or house made of soil. And whenever we saw people engaging the projects they were doing, there were, I mean, they were obviously amazed by it, right? And they knew it's an old tradition, but you also realized that they hadn't seen a building like this before, or they hadn't seen a building like this for a long time. So obviously going back, showing an alternative to the use of concrete, the overuse of concrete, especially in Thailand. There are beautiful old wooden houses which are taken down because, you know, wood is a material that is not as strong maybe as concrete, or maybe it's too hard to maintain it over the years. So a lot of these buildings been taken down and replaced by concrete buildings, which is a huge problem. And we're talking only about Thailand, right? This is a huge problem in Myanmar, in Vietnam, in all of the South Asian countries, the overuse of this concrete. I think we all have to go back and look at these old traditional ways of building, because we can't go on as we go on at the moment with what we're doing, with how we're constructing.
Ayaka?
Sure, like in the first is similar to Jan's point, but like I really think that the old traditional knowledge has a lot insight for the future too. Like that I work with the bamboo communities, and then I mean bamboo peoples, and a lot of the bamboo wisdoms they have is actually we can apply for the future sustainable development. So I think it's that I don't want to say like preserving the culture, because the culture also evolving, but again, appreciating that old traditions. So that means like we are also creating the future, like appreciating the future. Also, like we're trying to create something like more better future. I think it's, and then I said like in a culture is something like evolving as well. Like, so I don't want to say that we have to preserve the culture. That is also depending on the local people. Like I cannot never say like, and I think like they should preserve that bamboo music culture. But if they want, and then if they think that's really useful for the future generation, I would love to help them, like, and to work together. And then so because it's now, the world is more also fluid, and it's all like globalization, but again, the globalization in a positive way, like, and if we think it's not about like this, it's more about learning each other, and then like it's to appreciate that all that evolution of the culture as well. So that's probably what I should say.
Thank you. Manan?
So I'm actually in the point of my life where I'm thinking that if I don't do this, then who else would actually do it? And so for me, it's about the evolution is very correct, and it's about rejuvenating those ideas in a newer way. I'm not saying that we should bring this old way of measuring the volume, or I'm saying that we should only get into this philosophy, but it's about how the people would be able to connect, like think about it, and it should be about bringing the concept to the people in much more refreshing way, not just pushing back the traditional thoughts to them.
Thank you. Vrinda?
I think, Ayaka, just tying into your answer, I think you mentioned some of this in your presentations, but I just wanted to ask you, what are the major challenges with working with traditional crafts? And you'd mentioned that there's this stigma attached to bamboo in the Kalinga community, where it's, supposed to be for people that are not so well-to-do. So I'm just wondering, what was the kind of pushback from the community on traditional craft techniques? And I'd like to pose the same question to Jan and Dhiraj as well. Is there a pushback from the communities that you're working with to adopt traditional craft techniques? Ayaka, you can start, and then we can have Jan and Dhiraj.
It's always how I can say this, designing that okay, especially for the musical instruments, that like what I'm really trying to, like, in that the concept of the bamboo can be like in more it's not just the materials for that like poor people, something like, it's not like that's I think bamboo has a lot more potentials, and then like it can be transformed to something. And then I think now it's not me saying that, it's a whole world is like shifting in that way. And then I think that the government kind of started to involve, and then so that the government, like department of that natural resources, let's say, like, and they're encouraging the people to plant actually the bamboos. And then a whole world, I think I've been working 10 years now, like for this project. And then during this time, actually somehow the appreciation of bamboo evolved. So, and then that helped us a lot. That's one thing I could say. And then another thing is that, but still, when it comes to this, especially about the musical instruments, like we are very careful, like we will not bring out that original design of them to the outside, because it's really connected to the healing itself. And then the instruments from there should not be out from that area. So when we kind of introduced to the outside, we got permit from that village that we will put some our like signature designs in the outside, so that they can distinguish the real local one, and then that's some evolved designs. Those things are really difficult, like nuanced things, but we're trying to, of course, like not to upset like local communities or anything. And it's always the collaborations, and then like it's no sense if we do the things that harm the community. It's not like, I mean, so it's more what we want to do is like share the inspiration, so that the young generation think that it's really cool things to do something about cultural, like, and then so that's about it.
Jan?
Yeah, I can completely agree to Ayaka. I mean, we experienced actually this pushback in a couple of projects, and especially before we starting projects, obviously, because unfortunately, it is still considered Adobe, for example, mud bricks is considered material for the poor, and this is actually becoming, or this is actually because of the fact that it's free material. It's a really interesting psychological thing, right? You get something from free, you get something out of the soil, from in front of your house. You could dig a hole, and this becomes a building. And we were lucky that our first project was built for this hospital organization, Maytow Clinic. And Dr. Cynthia, the founder, she is a very progressive lady, you know, and she gave us the opportunity to build these 2 classrooms, and we used them as prototypes, and we used them as also a showcase that we brought other people, other headmasters from other schools, and showed them what we have done and how long lasting it is, how durable it is, and what the advantages are, no? The climate inside the classrooms, the sustainability, obviously, and that was really for us a big plus, obviously, to be able to do this first building, and then having this, and also always saying Dr. Cynthia really likes it because she's a well-known person within the community that helped convince sometimes other peoples in the community to at least have a look at it, right? To at least come and experience it, and or they already knew of it. But we also had the cases where it really wasn't wanted, where it was the school didn't want these 6 classrooms in a row next to each other made from this. They wanted a 2-story concrete building. They wanted a Thai school, you know, they wanted a school that looks like as if it's strong and must be built from concrete. So obviously we had to be very sensitive. We had to be very careful. We were never imposing anything on these communities, and yeah, we always were trying to let it play out and see, you know, if they like it, they like it. If they don't want to do it, then yeah, we were not there to build concrete buildings. That was not. I tried to avoid it as much as possible. And then that was this, you know, mutual sort of agreement saying, you know, if you want something different, then we unfortunately are not the right people to do that for you.
Dhiraj?
First of all, the people who are in these generational skills are stuck. They can't think outside of what they have been doing for generation. And yeah, they do. And another, for this for this DAO project, for this yogurt making project, actually there's a Juju DAO community, and Juju means king. So that community was they pushed back very hard because they have been capitalizing the same word, the same name, and they have turned it into a plastic containers. And I think it's also very justifiable because people are afraid of change. And a 22 years old who is me, like, come to the scene and say, then, like, this is not sustainable, we need to rethink it, we need to redesign it. And why would they, like, they are still exploiting the same thing and they're making money. So that was the part when I totally I just gave away the affiliation to Juju DAO, and I just removed their name and created my own product. And I think as the pushback is going to come, there's going to be lag, but I think it's about how we tackle those problems and how we make it happen.
Absolutely. You know, even in India, we have a similar issue. There's this resistance towards anything that is considered low tech. There's always this aspiration for a pakka house or a permanent house. And I think that's something we really need to, you know, we need to go back to culturally, climatically, contextually suitable materials. Ayush, you can take over with the next question.
This question is for Jan and Ayaka, and also for Dhiraj. How do you approach these communities as outsiders? And for Dhiraj, you spoke about having German architects working in your town, but as an insider, what values do you think these outsiders can bring in, or how is their perspective different from the insiders?
Ayaka, should I?
Sure, like you are ahead.
Yeah, I'm always, this is always a very interesting or kind of a little bit funny story as well. Obviously, it takes a lot of time, and this is obviously really a problem. If you come into a community, you don't speak the language, and you know, they look at you, and they might even have made already experiences that are not in you know, our favor. So it's just time, you know. If you're staying there, if you're staying in the communities, if you learn how to approach it, if you accept the cultural differences, if you kept how people communicate with each other within. When we started designing and building the master plan, or designing the master plan for this hospital, it was literally like we had meetings for a couple of hours, and we were discussing things, and then later on, Albert and we left the room, and that's where the real meeting started. When we left the room, you know, we kind of knew that, and then later on that day, we received emails that things have changed, and they've changed because of this and because of that, and but the longer you stick around, the more the more start to trust in you, and you know, you're not just someone who just stays there for 6 months and then leaves again and then never comes back. And this is also something I always came back, and I'm still coming back, and I'm still talking to the same people. And once you have this trust, now they're also communicating with me, even though I'm in Europe, and they know that I won't be able to come back next year, right? They're still asking questions. They ask me to design certain things, certain projects for them, which is great. And obviously learning the language helps a lot as well. But it's patience. You have to be patient.
Like for me, the role of the outsider is, first, I think I'm trying to deliver that different point of view to see the culture. That's because that there are already, like, maybe a good example is that the elders and then grandchildren or children are always around, and then there's a lot of opportunity the grandparents to teach that culture to the next generations. But like none of the children's looking at the grandparents' knowledge or skills as something important. So first, it's like to set up. As an outsider, I think that grandparents, like generation, has a lot of wisdom, and then so as an outsider, I can set up like in a workshop or that place for the elders to a space for them to share the knowledge, like so which is like just basically simply organize a workshop. But I cannot, instead of, I would just stay as a facilitator, and then so that I can accelerate that communication between the different intergenerational communications. And then that's one rule I could think of. And another one is access to the resources. I think it's really true that a lot of local community have a problems in accessing to that funding resources, or like in that, not only the funding, but like it's not knowledge resources or people resources or whatever. Like, and I think in this world now, like it's very hard to complete the project within the community. It's all about collaborations and everything is like, and you have to reach out to many things in order to just complete the one missions. And then, but sadly, like, and then, still there's a structural inequality existing in this world, and this is something that I cannot like solve with my own capacity either. And then, but I think I can stand up for them, like, and then I luckily, and then I'm appreciating, but I can have opportunities and everything, like, which probably the local people have a kind of probably more harder time to get. And then so I'm really trying to be like in that I will be the person to reach out to international organizations or like in this funding or whatever. And then, but like, I'm really thinking that is not for me, but like in that, if I can be the help of them, like I would do it, something like that. And then I think that's the one role as an outsider, like in it, yes.
Dhiraj?
Yeah, so it's a bit different for me, huh? So when Germans came to Bhaktapur, I think they really respected the city. They were not just destroying and renovating, but they were actually restoring, which was very impressive. And I think they saw the potentiality in the city 45 years ago. And also they also knew how to, because I think it was 45 years ago, it was the marriage of King Birendra, and instead of gifting him something like a porcelain or something, they actually renovated this Dattatreya Math. So they know how to create these stories and how to let it be for future people to know. And another would be they have restored this 45 years ago, and it is still in a very perfect condition. And what happening these days in Nepal is, so there is an architecture called Kumari Ghar. It's a very important culturally. And what people did, it was just maybe a week ago. So what they did was they painted the wooden, those beautifully carved doors and windows with enamel. So it was supposed to be oiled up, but they said, nah, why do it every year? Let's just paint enamel and the thing is done. So when you give these things to the hand of people who don't know the actual value, they just start doing whatever they wish to do. And I think in that context, the Germans, they really respected the city's architecture.
Thank you. Vrinda?
So this is the final question to all three of you, and then we'll go into asking each of you specific questions to your work. But from a student perspective, I just wanted to ask, what would you like to tell students who feel pressured into making more conventional forays into commercial design? What's the most rewarding part of the work that you do with craft and communities?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was coming from these like major or huge projects that I was working on, commercial projects before, and then going into, communities and work on small scale projects. I think the small scale projects that we did, you can really focus on the detailing of designs. You obviously have more freedom. Our work, I have to admit, was, even if you think about, like Thailand and the building regulations, we never had to deal with any of those because we were working a little bit on the side of things. Obviously, if I would have done projects in Bangkok, it's a different story. Bangkok is this big city and you have very strict regulations, as you have in probably all big metropolises in the world. But I think for students, it's really important to go out and experience. There was a design workshop in 2017 with the Austrian Embassy in Bangkok. It's called Design Contemplative Dialogue. That was the name. And it was basically that we got students from various universities going back into the provinces and looking at materials, looking at traditional ways of, weaving, ceramics, working and going into these old workshops and looking at these traditional materials. And it was very interesting for them. They're coming back with ideas how to apply it to contemporary architecture, to contemporary design. And I think it's important that people doing this, get out of your comfort zone, very important. Do things that you're not used to, very important. But there is no recipe. And that's also what I'm saying. I've been asked this question many, many times. It's up to your own character, it's up to you what you want to do yourself. But there's so much knowledge out there. You just have to grasp it. You just have to go and, collect it and make the most of it yourself, and you will find your own path.
Ayaka, would you like to go next?
Sure. I think that I'm doing more community-based designs, and all the work that I do is really not just like product designs, but also like all the project space making. It's all more public or community or something. It's not really at all like in a commercial, but that is my choice. And then I think it's in this world. I believe that everyone has a different role in this world. And then I think it's a really great thing to go to the commercial design as well. Like, why not? Like, and if you love it, like, I'm totally like, because though I'm working in the community and then I'm working in more like a public work, but of course I'm wearing clothes and then I don't know, like I'm not like, sometimes I don't know, clothes, it's more commercial designs one, and then I love it, like, and I'm not all the time like wearing that maybe community-based project clothing or something. Of course I appreciate like an artist's work, so I try to buy from like an individual, like an artist project or like ethical fashion project or something like that. But I think it's in this world, it's more about like in that appreciating the different new ways of course, again, if it's a commercial design, there's things that only the commercial design can do. Like it's so, I think the people who is pressured into really going to that those big, I don't know, like a more conventional design world, then I mean, I think it's, maybe you can try it, but if you think that you have to go there, maybe you can try it and you can learn a lot of things and you can bring back to the field that you actually really want to work. That's also one way to think about it. So I mean, like my message is like, whichever, I think every type of the design has a role, and that's why existing. So which way to choose it, as again also said, like, it's up to you, but like, and you will make the meaning of it, like, and then like I think that's the most important, like you yourself like create your own meanings by doing so. Yeah.
Dhiraj?
So I think as a student, we have this flexibility to move away from the conventional beliefs. We can produce the works that challenge what things really stand for. And it's okay, right? In student, we don't really think about commercial, and when it's time to go, like, we all need to feed ourselves. And at that time, I think we can have this flexibility of, do I really want to go through this, or do I want to create something that belief of challenging the convention and take it to a much more serious approach.
Right, thank you. My next question is for Dhiraj, but I would like Jan to just add on in the end. The 2015 earthquake in Nepal was such a pivotal point in the contemporary history of Nepal. Where does a designer place himself during such a crisis? And I'm asking this question because with the looming climate change crisis, we as designers and architects will be facing many, many such challenges in the future. So what was the role of the design community in rebuilding the country? And the question actually generally expands to even what Jan's work is doing. He's doing with the refugee community in Thailand.
So, shall I continue?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I think I was in the first year of design, and I wasn't much more into the projects back then, but the Kathmandu University Department for Art and Design actually, so there's a place called Bungamati in Patan, and so there most of the homes were destroyed, the temple was destroyed. So there was someone's daughter who was trying to take care of her personal hygiene, right? She need to take a bath and all, but she would go to that already. The house was already destroyed, but we don't know when it would actually fall. So her mother would say, like, please don't go, like it's very risky. But she goes and takes a bath, and it worries her mother. So the designers from Kathmandu University, what they did was they designed a very screen system, so you can take a bath outside. There's a big chalk, the big courtyard, and so they actually assembled these pieces and made it very locally, so it could be produced much more easily. So I think the bigger picture is there, like making earthquake-proof, resistant architecture and all. But I think it's about looking at these smaller things and how we are as a human being. I think that's much more important for a designer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also feel the same. I mean, I feel like that we as architects, we are often respond to situations when they've already happened, right? Like especially the earthquakes or refugee crisis. But I think we have to approach it completely different. We have to approach the facts. Why do we have these crises? Why do we have these situations? You know, global warming is happening, and you know, I think it's also our responsibility as architects to engage communities and you know, try to convince people, because there are still so many doubters in the world of, you know, this is just not true, and all the fake news that are happening. And I feel, you know, us, obviously we are, in the end, we are architects, but you know, I see myself also as someone that you know, maybe as an activist, and maybe talk about natural resources, talk about environment, talk about you know, sociology, even, you know, talk about a more wider aspect in what we're doing, not just about that building in the end. And so the conflict, for example, between, you know, within Myanmar is coming up again. It's flaring up again in some parts, and the refugees on the Thai side, they don't want to go back there. Some of them are stateless anyways. They don't have a Thai citizenship, they don't have a Burmese citizenship, so they have lived for now almost the third generation in these refugee camps. And you know, Thailand just, as you know, the politics just says we want to get rid of them. Burmese politics says we don't want them. You know, it's a lot about politics as well, and this is also where we have to start. We have to talk to people. We have to be open-minded towards humanistic and human solutions. And I think this is also something we are really struggling with as a, you know, community, as a global community.
Thank you. We're actually drawing almost to a close of our time, but I just want to extend that question to Ayaka as well. Since you are doing a degree in risk and resilience from the GSD, I'd like you to weigh in on designers' role in times of crisis.
Sure. Yes, like, and I'm now, yeah, like as you said, like I'm in the risk and resilience, and actually I've been working right now with the refugee communities in here in the United States, from the Bhutanese refugees actually. But anyways, what I was always thinking is that designers I think we can think the things from the different perspectives, and then that kind of skills and talent is, I think it's really useful to kind of design not just the product or the architecture, like it's more like a system design itself. Like, and so I think that we can be that a facilitator of the different disciplines. And then because like an architecture, let's say, like it's such a really like interdisciplinary field. And then I really feel like in it, we are learning a lot of things. I mean, like architects, like, and like all those designers, like, and we are incorporating a lot of different like field knowledge. And then so I think that is really beautiful if we can, if the designers and architects, like we can really connect that different fields, and then like, together we can make this world more like a resilient and a more beautiful and a more harmonized and societies. Yeah, so thank you.
Ayush, would you like to close?
Yeah, all right. Thank you all of you for showing how designers, how sensitive designers can be catalysts for social and cultural empowerment. The EDAYA project is just not about commercialization or a showcase of local craft, but also about truly giving back and empowering a community. I'm truly inspired by how Manan and how Dhiraj and Jan rediscovered the sense of belonging, and the sense of responsibility you have towards the community is truly commendable. Manan, there was something very special, very spiritual in your design process, and I'm truly inspired by that today. Thank you, and over to you, Kavindu.
Thank you so much, Ayush and Vrinda, for engaging us with your thoughtful questions, and to the speakers for your insightful perspectives.